Yes, hello. David Cornelius, he said challenge founder and product manager here at Split Media Labs. And yeah, I'm going to talk maybe not a lot about Ruby, but you guys are probably used to that since Ruby's been around for a while. But anyway, yeah, you can get the slides on there and we'll get started. Okay, so yeah, I traveled halfway around the world to tell you guys to write shitty code. That's basically it. So what I want to talk about is, yeah, shitty code, the cornerstone of innovation. I figured it was okay to use a buzzword if I used shitty in the title, so hopefully you agree. So yeah, first, what is shitty code? This can be, if you're new to developing, you might argue everything you're writing is shitty. And that might be true, and that's okay. If you're more experienced, we've gone through doing a git blame on a file, because you're kind of cursing out what's happening, and then you realize it was you who wrote that. Then you know what shitty code is as well. Everyone's written it. What it is depends on your experience. Like I said, if you're new, it can be everything. If you're experienced, it can be what you've written 2 years ago, or maybe 5 years ago. But if you look back at what you've written in the past, you have plenty of samples. This is code that typically got the job done. It's something you were capable at the time, and you put in the effort that was needed to get it done. So yeah, what I'm going to talk through here is how to safely and confidently write shitty code in 8 steps. You might be thinking to yourself, you could do it in 1 step, maybe. But yeah, hear me out. I think this method is maybe less harmful to your coworkers as well, so you don't necessarily have to leave your worst code out there when you're sharing it with people. So yeah, first up, find a problem to solve. Come up with a little project you want to do in your spare time. This is a Ruby meetup, so I imagine everyone already has something in mind, or some ideas that you've maybe thought of for years. But what's important here is to think about something that's doable in your spare time, first of all. So don't pick some grand idea necessarily. And yeah, find something that you will personally use as well. It's very important, I think, or something you have an immediate need for. So if you have this great idea, but you're not actually someone who's going to use it, and you don't understand it, then you're probably not going to be motivated to actually solve it and follow through. For me with Challenge, back in 2009, something like this happened to me at work. It was a company table tennis tournament, and I signed up for it. You know, I saw the bracket. They drew it in Excel and had like a paper version as well. And I was like way out here in this match where I had to play like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 5 matches I'd have to win just to get to the finals. And then the guy who drew the bracket, of course, he was like, you know, up top and just had to win twice to get to the finals. There was no reason for it really. And I did very little searching to see if there's a way to just tell him like, hey, generate a bracket with this, please. And there wasn't, so that's kind of where it started. The challenge was accepted at that point to make something better. So step 2 though, lower the bar. So at this point, don't think about like, I'm gonna do this startup. You're not building a startup here. As soon as you start thinking about that, it's kind of like naming your band before you have like a guitar or know how to play it. So don't worry about that. Don't worry about like monetizing. If there's not someone obvious out there who solved this, like don't start fretting about that. Like, if it's a good problem to solve, there are probably people who have solved it. But if you haven't heard of them yet, keep going. Yeah, when you mention it to people, if they're not impressed, that's okay. Ignore them. My wife was one of those people. and I can work it. So yeah, most importantly, yeah, solve something that you want to solve, and also learn something in the process, which gets to step 3. And step 3, I'd encourage you to use something that you're experienced in. This is a Ruby meetup group, so I'd say, like, if you know Rails, even if people, some people around you make fun of Rails at this point, who knows? It's still a very powerful tool, and if you're experienced in it, use it by all means. For challenge, that was Ruby and Rails. And then also pick something that you're wanting to improve upon. In my case, that was front-end work in general. So I wanted to do UIs, and also just more experience using style sheets and things that just usually don't have to mess with. And yeah, most importantly, don't hinder your ability to create. Don't pick tech that's like maybe too outside of your comfort area. Don't pick something just because you heard about it and you want to mess with it. Pick something you're comfortable with. Step 4, narrow your scope. If you have this big problem you're solving, just like focus in on something very close to the core of that problem. Don't waste your time worrying about things like authentication or like the first 20 gems you're going to add to your project before you've written anything. Yeah, simple is good. Doesn't go out of style. It'll stick around. For challenge, an example of that, the very first public version of challenge was a simple form. It took a list of names in a text area and spit out a tournament bracket. That gets to step 5. This is the best step, I think. This is where you actually get to solve a problem. And if you're a developer, like this is the fun thing. For challenge, the challenge accepted thing was like, I saw this problem. It's like, I think I can fix that. So this is proving to yourself that you can. But don't overthink it. I'd say like don't do TDD. Write long methods. Couple the hell out of your code. Like if you're using Rails, you're already using Rails, and run with it. Yeah, this is just the code to get the job done, really. No one needs to look at this. This can be very private, and that's fine. Here's kind of a sample of some code that's hopefully still not in the challenge project, but could be. And I think this was from like a Swiss tournament algorithm. But it's like, there are comments that may or may not be helpful, but were more helpful in the day I wrote it, maybe. But it's okay. You know what? I probably got this done in like a couple hours. And if I'd written it the right way, it may have taken me like a week, and I just never would have finished. So, step 6. This one's important as well. Learn something. This is part of the motivation to keep you going. Spend time focusing on the thing you want to improve. This can be the slower part, but at this point, you already have solved part of the problem you're after, and this is more about like refining. So in the same way that it can be easier to refactor code than start from scratch, it's also easier to learn something when you have something to apply it to versus reading a book or doing a tutorial. So an example for challenge here, like this is more like back-end work that I would have been comfortable with at the time and how I started. It's like I needed to make a tournament bracket, and I was like, okay, how am I going to model that? How am I going to store everything, do the tree and everything to tie things together for double elimination? And when I got to that point, in my head I was just like, I'm so awesome at this point. Like, isn't everyone impressed? But if I showed that to anyone, like especially my wife or anyone who said meh before, they'd be like, meh. But then the next part was focusing on the front end in an area I usually don't work on, and spending some time like translating that thing that you wrote shitty code on, that's fine, and just spending some time in this case on the front end and presenting that in a way that maybe could change someone's opinion or just make it more interesting to learn with. Which gets to step 7, show it off. And yeah, not the shitty code, again. Don't show that off necessarily. That's not the fun part. But this is a chance for you to kind of reevaluate, like celebrate what you've done and show it to some people. So in this case, like Challenge still has, let's see where this pulls up. Oh yeah, so this page, not that much. This page is still on Challenge today and is very close to the first page that was ever published almost 10 years ago. And as you can see, it's basically like, tell me what format you want. I'll say like double elimination. Give me the people in the tournament and generate a bracket for me. And you get a bracket. Very basic, but solves a clear problem, and it's kind of impressive to people as well. It's something cool to show off. And then this is also very important too. Track usage. If it's something like a web app, or like something you open source or whatever the case, make sure you can tell if people care. Like, just don't make it a public page that people may or may not be looking at, because it's important to know if people find it useful, or and make sure they can contact you as well, because that becomes important if you want to build upon the idea. So, and that goes into step 8, and that's reassessing. Are you still obsessed with the idea at this point? Are people using what you created? If they can contact you, are they asking you to enhance it, like add another format to it or change something about it? If they go to the bother of actually contacting you or revisiting the site, you may have something that you can build upon. And at this point, like if startup is a motivation for you, this is a good point to actually start thinking about it, because you're already way better off than a lot of startups at this point. And just because you have shitty code at this point doesn't really matter, because you're already solving a problem. A lot of people can even raise millions of dollars, and when you ask them, like, what are you really fixing? They're like, nothing really, but it's kind of cool. But you've actually solved a problem at this point, and you've also verified that there's at least some market, which can be another thing that holds startups back. I mean, if you don't have a market for the thing you've built, and then you're going to be in a lot of trouble, for sure. So moving on here. I lost my presentation view. There it is. And the great part here is, because you've only written shitty code at this point, if you realize that this idea you had is not worth continuing, like either you got bored or it has no potential as a startup, maybe, like there's no market, then like you haven't wasted a ton of effort. You haven't wasted millions of someone else's dollars. All you have to do is throw away the shitty code, and that doesn't hurt doing that. Here then is a sample of Google Analytics from for Challenge in its first year. So you can see assessing the market can take some time. It took a good month before like more than a couple people were just like looking at it. But then as soon as you start noticing kind of the lows picking up over time, and as soon as people are contacting you about what you're doing and asking for things, like it gets really interesting then. So yeah, recap. Find a problem to solve, lower the bar. You're not doing a startup here. Choose your tech. Choose something you know and you're efficient with, and something you want to learn. Narrow your scope. Just focus on the core problem. Write shitty code. That's the fun part. Yes, be sure to learn something and show it off, and then reassess at the end. So now you know how to safely and confidently write shitty code, but I think this part's important to mention as well. You also need to know when to stop. And I got to put a plug in for tests, of course. At some point, if people are relying on what you've written and you want to make your code maintainable, shareable, work with people, you need to improve your test coverage. I kind of learned this lesson the hard way because I was very slow getting into testing, and it made it a lot harder to work with people and to sleep at night, for instance. So be sure to test your stuff no matter what. And yes, we're hiring, of course, and we write tests. So we don't just write shitty code, I promise. That's just how you get started. So yeah, thank you.